Hey, thank you so much, Shilpi. This one's the one that I've been waiting for. I am joined with a band of very, very eminent CIOs. Hopefully, I can consider them as my peers, my friends from the industry. I learn a lot from my conversation with them. And I hope the next 45 to 50 odd minutes, we have a conversation which brings a lot of credence to all our friends who are listening to this. Uh, Without further ado, all of you need no introduction since you did the honor. So I'll probably jump right in. I'll start with Mitali. Mitali, I mean, as indicated through my presentation, when we speak about enterprise IT, you know, the enterprise IT has ebbed and flown from a distributed IT landscape to a central landscape, and it's been a oscillating flow. So if you remember, your experience suggests you've been an IBMer, so you know it better than anybody else does. The world had its mainframes, then it had its PCs, then came cloud, and now we are living in the world of edge sites also. So it has truly been, centralized and distributed. So my question to you is how do you see this journey of enterprise IT, and what makes it compelling for you when you live in a world where you need to encompass both the distributed kind of computing as well as centralized kind of computing? What is your view into this?
So Apalak, as you said, I have seen that journey. So when I started myself as a coder, it used to be a two-tier architecture, then three-tier. Then we had cloud coming in, distributed, centralized. But I feel it totally depends on the need of the business, the need of the application. It's just not that it has to be centralized or it has to be distributed. So what we are doing in our organization, for example, we see a lot of growth happening in the last few years. So the one which was, centralized, the hardware is almost 5 years old. It's not able to take the load. Performance is becoming a problem, and being in healthcare, availability and performance both are very, very important. I mean, everything needs to be there 24/7 and at the tip of fingers. So there, we are taking it to a distributed architecture. So it is scalable, it is performance oriented. But then there are other applications which are not that critical, maybe used by a very few number of users. We don't expect a lot of growth on those applications. So those we are taking, they probably in a centralized server, we don't see any growth. So it actually is a, defined by the business need. And as you go to distributed architecture, there are also other facts to consider, like cost, for example, complexity, maintainability. So you have to weigh all those together along with the need of your business and then decide what's needed. So it's not that if it's distributed, everything has to be distributed, or if it's centralized, everything has to be centralized. So it still gets defined by the need of the business. It could be that you need only centralized, you don't need distributed at all. Could be. Right, so it's actually the business defines it what's needed. And based on that, then you define your strategy on how you want to architect it.
I love the brevity and succinctity with how you put this. Anil, I'll get you here because you're part of an organization which doles out centralized compute services. You also provide managed service, but you also have an internal role, right? As a CIO for your organization. It's very interesting, and that is where, this is one question I'm going to ask all the three of you, because the beauty of this conversation is all the three represent very different kind of organizations. I mean, Mitali was very honest about saying, it completely depends on the need of the business. Anil, while what you spell out to your clients can be one kind of service, but the internal requirement might be very different. How do you see this?
So, see, today in this world, you require all three types. Each has an individual use case. For example, when I'm talking about these SCADAs that we use to run our digital data centers, whether it's their electricity, BMS, etc., it requires, so those are kind of robotic instructions which require a millisecond latency from the control room. They need to be like an edge. They need to be within the premises. Because if I bring it out of the edge, the latency itself beats the purpose of maybe changing over an electricity circuit or auto starting something or shutting down something based on the sensors. Then comes your maybe service APIs. Now, service API is something, let's say, an example around a function or a persona. So let's take an example of an employee itself. He would have a payroll, he would have an email collaboration, he would have an intranet portal, he would have certain business apps. If we just remove the business app or business function from his role, you could then group all of that into various personas. So a sales guy would add a CRM to his portfolio. A finance guy would add some SAP or a Tally to his portfolio. HR may add some application. And those personas now you can look dually. You could look it as a SaaS provider, which is more like a centralized app, or you could look it as a distributed, like the way we used to distribute our email exchanges, etc. across. You could look it as a central, network services, or like work from home, you could distribute this using SD-WAN devices, etc. to various branches. And that's how you look at it from a people services side. The third side where this thing comes into play is your front office, how you're accessing your customers. Now, for us, we need to provide our customers reports. We need to provide them invoicing. As we know, Government of India has put in a GST, and even to transfer goods, you have e-wayables. So all of this now becomes a service or a distributed architecture. The nearest it is to the customer it is interacting with. The latency defines it. The nearest to the customer who is using it, the better it is. And finally, you come down to the centralized apps. So what are these centralized apps? These centralized apps are maybe DC lifecycle management applications, maybe governance applications, maybe these centralized capacity projections, whatever you call it in analytics. So those type of things which require a lot of data ingestion, which have a staticity where decision has a staticity of maybe a quarter or a month or a year. Those kind still have to be centralized because you require a one view to all. So that's how we have been rolling or adapting our IT to. Yes, it's a mix and match. You put something on cloud, something on server, but the way the end customer, whichever is the end customer, and what is the need, whether it's machine in DC, whether it's an employee, whether it's a customer, or whether it's our own governance. Accordingly, these applications are shaping up.
I completely hear you, Anil. If I'll take a cue from what you just said, I'll get Prasenjit in the conversation. Prasenjit, as Anil mentioned, I think it's a right view. It's very future-proof. He said, all the types of compute will coexist. Be it a distributed compute environment or a centralized compute environment. Typically, when we talk about a centralized computer, you are either referring to a public cloud environment or an on-premise data center, and then you have your edge sites. It could be remote location. Now, particularly in your example, you have such rich experience of managing very large scale infrastructure projects, and which are scattered all across the nation. Right? How do you see for companies who traditionally, been in centralized architecture of either on-premise or on cloud, gravitating towards edge? Because why I'm asking is, the answer probably is yes, we have to. But what are some of the things that they need to look into while doing this? But that's the challenging bit. What is your view to this?
Okay, yeah, thanks. In fact, let me give a different twist to whatever is being discussed here by my fellow panelists. Okay, now when we are talking about this IT evaluation over the years, from a centralized to a distributed computing requirement. So as per me, the crux behind the evolution of enterprise, this kind of architecture, from a discrete to a centralized to a distributed, is all towards experience. So when I talk about experience, it is about user experience or customer experience, which in turn results in a business efficiency and growth. So today we all know that any business which is working on a principle of customer experience n equal to 1. Okay, how do we reach to the last mile and give the best of the experience? To make it simpler, let's look into a real business case evaluation of selling goods to customers. Earlier, we had physical shops, then transformed into shopping malls, which is a centralized mall. Then came the app-based e-commerce platform. Now, when this app-based e-commerce platforms they came in, okay, the concept of multiple stores evolved from a central store to improve what? Yes, it is customer experience and their demands and time for delivery. However, now this has evolved to an edge store, or what we call nowadays as a dark store, wherein these e-commerce companies tries to compete with each other on how soon the material can be delivered. Examples like Blinkit, Zeptos, okay. Hence, all these are because of customer experience and agility of business. Similarly, to support business, which is moving from a traditional model to a digital transformation model for more or less all the organization, IT also needs to evolve. Now, this can be 100% shift from a centralized to a distributed model, or on a hybrid kind of architecture, depending on the business type and spend on the IT initiatives. Further, this can also be triggered due to a natural disaster, calamity, pandemic, what we have seen. Okay, so the bottom line is availability, reliability, and user experience, and that's why this entire transformation is happening.
I think that's a very good example you just gave. And that made me think. You spoke about two examples of Blinkit and Zepto. See, traditional way of looking at IT postures is business demands, IT response. When such companies, it was so tech driven, without technology, the company does not exist. I think the world that we live in is, I think which is why all the shout and not are very rightfully so about you having a rightful position in the board, because you called business decisions, which was not a thing of the past per se. But thank you so much for pointing this out. So I now open the question to all the three of you. I'll probably request one by one to ask for your views. See, we all agree to the fact that when we talk about a truly hybrid IT experience, it is some composition of on-premise data centers. They're not going anywhere. Let's also admit that on-premise data centers, a cloud environment, and slowly but surely edge sites. But in order to do this entire provisioning seamless, right? It's very important that we keep on modernizing a data center. Because, see, we all know for a fact, like all the three of you represent fairly established organizations. Be it the CK Birla Group of Hospitals, Control S, or your organization. In such a scenario, because we know a typical public cloud environment has the best of the technology, right? Edge sites which will be built as greenfield will be very new. It's only data centers which have a lot of legacy infrastructure. So my question to you is, I'm not even asking you why is it important, right? I know data center modernization is an important task and all of you are doing it. But what makes a data center modern? Because I think our friends listening to all of you, like the first previous question, gain a lot, because everybody has a different view to how they define a modern data center. Probably I'll start now with Prasenjit, then to Anil, and then to Mitali. Prasenjit, if I could request you to take this.
Okay, great question. In fact, that's the need of the hour, that how do we look into a data center modernization? Well, the digital transformation and the accompanying explosion in enterprise data has thrust CIOs and CTOs or the IT leaders like us into an era of relentless scaling up. Now, IT needs to provide a high performance foundation or a compute infrastructure across the enterprise to develop and accommodate new delivery models. So the need is to streamline operations, reduce cost, reduce wastages, while enhancing how long should we sustain. Again, responding or adapting to the quick and flexible changes in the rapid business environment and evolution to enable ongoing transformation for business also. Definitely the new age technologies like AI, machine learning, analytics, everything has to be brought in. Is my data center ready for that? Mining of data effectively to deliver insights from the data, okay, and to drive the revenue growth for the organization. So your data center modernization is around all this area. Now, to serve our modern customers, the enterprise needs a modernized data center that can support a simpler software-defined environment that improves operations. It can increase the agility, flexibility, and scalability, definitely with a lower TCO. The modern data center has evolved from a facility containing an on-premise infrastructure to one that connects an on-premise infrastructure to a cloud infrastructure where networks, application, workloads are virtualized in multiple private and public clouds.
Absolutely.
Okay, so the advantages of a modern data center, which we are also working towards, okay, from, as I said in the beginning, that from a legacy to a modernized data center. So the advantages, what if every one of us will reap, is on the security front, on the reliability, on the availability, reduction in the energy cost, and definitely leading to a higher and increased productivity.
I think of all that you said, I think the go-to word, like you mentioned, is software defined. I think the future of data center is software defined. I like it because it helps you achieve what your business demands. Flexibility, agility, and the seamless integration between a cloud environment to an on-prem environment. Thank you so much. Anil, I think you should be best equipped to answer this actually, because you are yourself a service provider who has helped many organizations embark on this journey. And when you're doing so, I'm sure you use a lot of best practices that you deployed within your organization. So in your view of doing this, learning from all that you've done, how do you see your entire data center modernization initiative? Anil, you are on mute, Anil.
So as rightly pointed out by the esteemed panelist, and that you caught, it has to come on a click of a button. Gone are the days where I buy a servers, load the software, harden it, configure it, and test it and release it in 7 days. It has to be done now. And that can only happen like our car dashboards. If you see over the years, they give now all such parameters, whether it's left indicator, right indicator. It's like a cockpit for your operations. So this cockpit has to be made around the software defined everything. The second, as pointed out by the panelists, it has to be scalable. Gone are the days where when you want to add capacity or reduce capacity, you again have to plan a budget, etc., and then waiting for 3 months, 4 months for your downtime to do it. Keeping these two into views, we have had a steep learning cycle for our internal applications. For example, when the cloud came in, they came in with SRE, System Reliability Engineering. And the likes of feed that we used to get from our O365s and our application on AWS and all were all observability alerts versus our own on-premise setup, which was very traditionally ITSM, P1, P2, P3 tickets, and you had CMDBs and change management. So on one side, you have equipped your teams to do whatever you want on an immediate basis. On the other side, you had this whole digital divide of ITSM where you plan a cab, you take a call, you have a... These two we had to meet. So in fact, at last we decided that we'll put in the latest infra from Red Hat and SUSE, their Kubernetes setup in-house. And we upgraded our applications from the so-called .NET and Java onto Kubernetes, and brought all of them on a similar experience, at least from a software delivery side. The second was, of course, a key learning within the data centers, because our suppliers like Dell and various other OEMs, they started to give us software controls. So gone were the days where you have to connect back to back hardware and then do. They came in with their own libraries, the network vendors, the server vendors, the virtualization vendors, storage vendors. We started to collate all of them. And we ended up with an internal portal known as ICP. So you have all these services there if you want to use the on-prem one. And you had the services of AWS, Azure, etc. So depending on your permissions, you go there. So this is the kind of scalability and agility that a software defined brings in, because on a click of a button, you can do it. The second challenge was, of course, observability, because our world was SNMP earlier, the kinds of Zabbix, etc., giving us data. And the feed that we used to get from a CloudTrail or a Azure monitor was much in depth. So we then started on this second journey of observability. We call it as SHOP internally, self-healing operations platform. So these new age systems, we started to collate the data into Elastic stores. So that at least from a, from alerting, from preempting that there is some fault, there is a uniform experience across the platforms. That was a 8-month job. And that is how we have been modernizing or following the path and trying to equal from an operations perspective both sides.
Well, I'll hold on to that. There are a lot of questions that are coming my way. But I'll get back to you. I'll just get Mitali here. Mitali, because I've asked the question, specifically Prasenjit and Anil, about the, how they modernize their definition of modernizing data center. I'm fairly explicit now, but like every technology rollout, there will always be challenges. But my question is 2 parts. One, and actually, if after Mitali you want to add, Anil, please do so. See, when we talk about cloud migration issues, right? So it's a nice fancy word, but we know the benefits of cloud. We know the challenges of cloud. Also, there are a lot of companies doing cloud repatriation these days. So it is not an easy bit, getting your cloud migration journey correct, right? So while I understand the benefits of modernizing a data center, right? What are some of the challenges, like how you face the cloud migration approach? I'm sure it's not an easy task. It's easy to speak about it, not so easy to implement it. So again, from a healthcare point of view, from a service point of view, from an infrastructure point of view, I'm sure the challenges will be very different. Mitali, what is your view to this? What are some of the, you may not have a blueprint of all the answers to this, and we don't have the time for that. What are the bigger challenges when we talk about modern data centers? Is it people? Is it technology in itself? Is it processes? Where do we begin?
So see, if you talk about healthcare, it's going through very interesting times, right? 2 years back, before the pandemic stuck in, technology investments in healthcare was zero. Nobody wanted to invest in technology. Now, suddenly we saw the entire healthcare infrastructure going down when the pandemic hit. And I think the only good thing that it did was people in healthcare are now aware that technology is the only way to go, move forward. Traditionally, if you look at healthcare, the care was restricted to the 4 walls of the hospital. You don't have to, move out. People fall sick, they come in. Now it has moved beyond that 4 walls. Traditionally, earlier also here, we had a data center. We were happy with it. Management cloud, no, cloud means my data is gone. It's exposed to everybody, the data is gone. So that's the thinking, and it's still there in healthcare organizations. You'll find very few healthcare organizations have actually moved to cloud. But what happened with the pandemic is suddenly there was a request of telemedicine. You have to do it. There was no way out. People couldn't come to hospital. And how do you do it with the traditional infrastructure? There was no way out, but you had to move to cloud out of, force, not by choice maybe, but out of chores. So that was our first foray into cloud. We went for a SaaS platform because I was given a mandate. You have to get it up and running in 7 days. Now, how do you do it? There's no other option. Then the next problem came. Our radiologists, they were down with COVID. Our PAC system was traditionally, inside. No, of course, images, you can't get it exposed outside. How do you report? It cannot stop. So then we actually start the migration, right? You know, it was again a hybrid architecture. We migrated, storage was here, then we moved the application there. So that's how we started. Okay. And there were challenges because if you ask me, it was not a very well-defined thought of. It was suddenly the problem came and we had to do it. It was not that you had to think for 6 months and then you kind of, you know, start your cloud journey. So that's how it happened with healthcare in specific. And now we are kind of looking at a very long-term, you know, vision on how we have a balance with our on-prem data center and cloud. And few of the challenges that we find is one is security related. You know, how do you safeguard all that data? Because with the COVID coming in, the attack on the healthcare industry has also increased because now things have moved to cloud, right? So that is in the mind of the management, the CEO, whenever you go with the proposition, you know, how do you make sure that my data is secure? So be it on-prem, be it cloud, that's one of the biggest challenges to solve. And, you know, you can never say that I'm 100% secure, whatever we do about it. So from a healthcare point of view, that's one of the biggest challenges that we have. Then, of course, skill. So we have started training. So we are starting our you know, journey to cloud. We've moved some critical workloads to AWS. We are in the process of moving the rest. Skill. So though you have the OEM, though you have a vendor, but it's very important to have the skills in-house because healthcare, again, as I was telling you, it's, you know, very time sensitive. A billing desk, if there's a problem in the billing, you know, your systems are down, and especially in Calcutta, you know, there will be a mob outside if they have to start for 10 minutes. So, you know, that's the pressure we are in. I cannot afford a single second of downtime. So my availability is very much important. And if I have to rely on the vendor all the time, that becomes difficult. So having in-house skills to be at least the first level of response is very, very important. It can happen anytime. You know, there's emergency at the night, 10 people suddenly coming in after an accident. And even if you have a planned downtime, you know, you have to cancel it. So that's how the nature of the business is. So security, of course, skills, and then we have a lot of legacy applications. You wouldn't believe, still I have applications running on Windows XP and Windows 7. I can't get rid of it because the vendor also doesn't know whether it's going to work, you know, so we are still struggling to figure out what to do with it. So integration to those applications, you know, legacy, how to get rid of them, get them moved to cloud. So those are, you know, I would say they're very specific to healthcare, but, you know, those are, I would say, the top 3 challenges, you know, that I'm facing on my cloud migration journey.
I can't repeat myself. I love the honesty with which you are answering, Mitali. In fact, I'll give me further to my question. The question is something. I'm just alluding to what Mitali mentioned. Some of the challenges are very, very pertinent. And maybe a question is very basic, because I'm probably not a technical person. But what about the visibility to all this? I understand when we speak about hybrid cloud, although I know very few examples of, you know, hybrid cloud, which actually, but I'm not talking about hybrid, I'm talking about hybrid IT environment, which is you have further happening on premise, certain on cloud, some on an edge location. Is it not tough to have a central control visibility of all that's happening? Because at the end of the buck stops at you. And you are the guy who everybody will reach out to if something goes wrong. Like Mitali, I think Mitali spoke about in business continuity terms, we're talking about RTO and RPO. I mean, healthcare cannot afford to have really close to zero RTO and RPO. And same goes for BFSI sector, for the infrastructure sector. But how do you see that? Because considering that, and it's also a mix of many vendors that you have to deal with. You know, you deal with one service provider for, say, Edge, one who will take care of your data center, one other public cloud environment. How complex? I'm sure it is complex, but if you have to answer it in the next 3 to 4 minutes, how would you do that? You're on mute. Yeah. You're on mute.
Yeah.
And then
so
I'll come to
as rightly said that when we plan for modernization of the data center, definitely there will be challenges, as rightly pointed out by Mitali. It may be on the integration part, it may be on the skill set, it may be on the cost approval, it may be downtime. I mean, what can, when we are actually transforming from on-premise to a cloud or whatever. So how do you do it? Okay, so all those challenges definitely will be there. And but let us see that for any kind of a modern data center, okay, what all things, if it might be in the edge or it may be on core, what are the things we need to consider, okay, and so that what we rightly said, that if you have a central console where we have a visualization, we have a insights from those, okay. So in a modern data center, if we talk about, in fact, Mr. Anil Nama will be better to speak on this, but still with my experience and what we have been doing, the things to be considered are more on, do we have a virtualized kind of environment in a modern data center? Okay. Is my data center taking less of my rack space? Okay. Or do we have a hybrid kind of environment? Okay. What kind of automation tools do we bring in so that we can actually bring in all the data together in a single place? Okay. What kind of intelligent monitoring we can do? Okay. Is my power consumption less, but with a high compute? Okay. What kind of security? It might be a chip level security, what we are trying to bring in. What kind of network infrastructure do we have? Have we moved from the traditional 3G, 4G to a 5G kind of a network based on availability? Okay. So currently, most high compute technology relies heavily on the cloud. Okay, that's exactly Mitali said, that you have to roll out immediately something, or you don't know what kind of compute you need to bring in into your enterprise. Okay, so we are heavily relying on the cloud. We know that, fine, it can scale up, scale down, whatever. But unfortunately, this reliance on the cloud can lead to a latency issue, as the process of data traveling between the data center and the device can be affected by several factors, we know. Okay, so to solve this issue, the big step is to adopt a edge compute, what we have been discussing. Okay, and definitely it may be on the edge or on the core side if we have a hyper-converged infrastructure. Okay, your HCI definitely allows technology to operate within a smaller hardware design and giving you the best of the compute and the best of the results. Okay, so edge computing can take advantage of HCI environment by sharing shared storage between the compute nodes and allowing users to manage all their edge computing workloads from a single management interface. Okay, now this streamlined process removes the network latency, okay, caused by transferring data between two different sites, because if you have a HCI kind of environment, okay, so by storing data on edge servers that reside as close as possible to the point of origin, reducing network traffic and making business insights actionable and faster than ever before is the right thing what we can do. So all these things, what we are saying, that it can be on the edge side or on the core side, bringing in a technology like hyperconverged infrastructure will actually help organizations to get the best of the results and make their business grow fast.
Thank you so much. I mean, you're actually helping me take the discussion forward. So my next question was on hyperconverged. I was just wondering how do I bring that in? Because when we talk about the journey of distributed architecture and central architecture, similarly, when we talk about data center landscape, if you see that also has kind of gone through a continuum, right? Earlier, your data centers were distributed all across. Now, then we saw, the consolidation of data centers. Then came the entire concept of virtualization, where and the virtualization as a concept was the foundation, the chassis to bring in cloud. I mean, cloud environment has to be on a virtual environment. Now we're speaking about converged infrastructure, hyper-converged infrastructure. Anil, now again, being a service provider, I'm 10% sure you know the benefits of hyper-converged. I'm sure you espouse upon the benefits to your client, but from an Indian context, because many a times global context may not be relevant to the Indian context. You've seen the success of server virtualization in a data center. I'm sure all of you have many of your workloads on a virtual, if not all. How do you see the story of hyper-converged in a country like us? Do you see that kind of success? And if so, what are some of the reasons for that benefit?
So as per the earlier discussion by Mukherjee, see, hyper-converged means you are just provisioning like a cloud. on your in-data center. You're not worrying about how will the network connectivity go in, what's happening to the storage and all. So when you look at those workloads, be it Nutanix, be it any such HCI version that we use, it's quite easy to maintain and roll out. The second is cloud pods are not always available. Public cloud pods are not available within the latency reach that we want. And therefore, these HCIs placed there help us achieve our objectives of our customers accessing data in a X latency time. Yeah, there is always a trade-off, right? Because it's new technology, few applications, few workloads may not marry it. But as far as a end consumer's requirement of email, collaboration, web-based, mobile-based applications are considered, we are mostly ported to any HCI environment. And that's how we also see it. We call that evolution in a different way. So we call it as an hardware. So we used to buy hardwares and do it. Then what you call as virtualization, we used to call it as community cloud. Because you did one software stack standardization, one network, one firewall, and you rolled out multiples of them. And then comes this hyperconverged. So all of this is ease to do things with minimum complexity and getting our input. So earlier hardware was a service which got at hardware level. A community means we got it somewhere between that uptime of a VM, but above the hardware. Right. And in a HCI, you are directly getting it at your data and your compute level used inside the app. And that eases the worry on how do we manage, where do we manage, what happens, something goes down. So it leads to availability, it leads to better integrity, and then you can plan on top of it. So from our side, we use HCI. We use it especially for the collaborative spaces of the employee apps so that it's much more easier, much more nearer to them to service.
Basically, in fact, I spoke about in my presentation also. I mean, for instance, industry like CDN, anywhere you're using Edge, you soon see, edge size and hyperconverge are going hand in hand. And that's a trend that is most likely to take up. It will take globally, and I'm sure India will have an update pretty soon. Anil, thank you so much for this. But Mitali, I'll now I have a question for you. It's probably a little tangential question. Question is, I remember you speaking about, you taking some of your workload to AWS and some other public cloud environment as well. So, but as a CIO, you understand that the on-prem data center also exists. You just can't do it with your legacy workloads, right? But the reality of the matter is you have a handful of IT budget with you, right? So at one end, you are thinking of the future and you're offloading certain applications onto the cloud. But at the same time, you hear and you know that modernizing data center is important. But even modernization initiatives needs investment. As a CIO, and I think this is because everybody who's listening to us knows the benefit. There's enough on the net which talks about the benefits of all this. Here on a panel, it's very important to also understand how do I balance budgets of something that I need to cloudify, at the same time modernize data center. Both need money, right? How do I balance? How do I do the year and end? Maybe it's a loaded question, but let's still we will take a dig at this.
See, so the IT budget is also driven by business. You just cannot take a IT budget decision in isolation. It also again depends on your business priorities. Your business priorities gets defined and then you align your IT budget to it. So although technically I understand that cloud is important, my data center is also important. So I weigh depending on where my critical workload is. What is it that is more important to my hospital? Is it the growth now? Is it so operations is something which is, we don't compromise. We cannot.
Right.
So availability, performance, wherever it takes, whether it is cloud data center, that comes first. So whatever has to be done, right, for those. So that's without compromise given. Other than that, I think whether it is probably I have to do, whether I need to do edge, whether I need to do analytics, what do I need to do, or I need to invest on modernizing my data center, because the budget is limited. Again, whether what my business wants. In the next year, what is it that it is looking at? Is it looking at some new business expansion that needs some edge? Are we looking at, for example, the remote care as a separate vertical to be coming in, or are we looking at, the pharmacy to be kind of be on app? So it all depends on what the business priority is. And depending on that, then the IT budget gets aligned. Of course, we don't compromise on certain things like, as I said, availability, RTO, RPO, I have to maintain. Security, I think that takes a considerable amount of my budget now, irrespective of anything, because again, a no-brainer, you have to do it. So that's how.
Maybe I'm oversimplifying the question, but I'm opening this to all the three of you. What I'm trying to say, for instance, and maybe my assumption is wrong, your top management knows everything. So for instance, you go today and you ask for budget for cloud because of this business use case. And they hear you and their budget is provision. Now you tomorrow go and say, you know what, well, that is important. I also need money to modernize my data center. The question might be, hey, you just took money from us for cloud ramping. Why do you need to modernize the data center? Why can't you have everything? So my question is, do you face such scenarios?
Right. So
and
that is
a real-time scenario.
No, that is tough. So for example, in our organization, the budget gets defined at the start of the financial year. And if there is for example, now I'm struggling with the problem. AWS, cloud is never, cost effective. It's not cheaper. Whatever we say, it's not cheap. Yeah. So our go live date has been extended. Now I cannot optimize my, cloud unless I know the actual production workload. So my UAT, my couple of, they need to be there for 2-3 more months. I need additional budget, which will take on a hit on EBITDA now, right? And there I'm struggling. So I have to make them explain. It's very difficult to make them explain that why do I need it? Why, after production only I can streamline and, commit to that whatever I have provision on cloud. So it is a difficult game. Then you do all the exceptions, probably reach out to the chairman or, take people who are on your side, try to explain them. But it's a very, very tough game. I'm going through it as I speak. So it's not easy, as I said. So you have to be first convinced that it is needed. And then probably, each organization will have different ways to figure that out. How to budgeting. And that's how we do it.
Right. Prasenjit, what is your view to this? Because, like I said, this is a loaded question, and your panel is important to ask the tough ones also. I mean, we know the benefits. So how do you manage such a scenario?
So I totally resonate to what Mitali said, that the IT budgets definitely is a byproduct of the business, what they need for the particular, at the beginning, whenever the AOP is being generated, okay. So IT has to work hand in glove with business for the reason. Okay, one part is aligning to business and working, okay, on their requirement and what kind of automation, digitization we need to bring in. The other area is must to have, which will be the backend part of IT. Okay, for doing that particular activity, what you need to have at the backend. It may be your own data center, it may be on cloud, colo, or a hybrid kind of a model. Okay, now how do we present it to the management? Is an art, what I have learned throughout my years. Okay, there are things which can be approved with a sense of fear. Just pardon me, the same thing which happens, Ms. Mitali, pardon me, the same thing which happens in a hospital kind of environment when a patient goes in. Okay, there might be some sense of fear is pushed in, that you need to do this test, that test, or this operation, or whatever happens. This is a fact. Okay, same thing which happens into a car service industry, wherein you push your car into a garage. They will say this has gone wrong, and this is a sense of fear. So here also I have learned it. Suppose security. Okay, now in the senior man, now currently it is the talk of the board also, but earlier, a couple of years ago also, no one cared about security, information security. Nobody, the top management, they want the task to be done. But if we compromise on the information security budget or the information security initiatives, the entire business can go down. That's the fear. Or if there is a breach from some end, some kind of thing, the CEO of the organization can be put behind bars because of many reasons. So that fear, if you try to present and bring in with the right scenarios, I think I have done this in my previous organization where my budget was not getting and 5 years ago on information security. So I learned it from some of my seniors that you present them and say that if this doesn't happen, you as a CEO might go behind bars with some real case studies. Okay, so that's how. So the thing which is needed for the business, okay, how do we present it? Okay, and to show them that if this doesn't happen, the business which they are looking for might go down.
Right.
Okay, that's how it's a totally strategy. And how do you present
it? Is selling a life insurance policy, God forbid you don't die, but in case you die, what happens to your family?
And for example, incidents like AIMS, that helped me get some additional budget.
Yes,
I
So
want
that helps as well.
to allude to that because being an analyst, I'm supposed to be completely neutral. We've covered that in our Tech This Week show, but I know exactly what you're saying because there was a fairly big news that happened last November, December, if my memory is correct.
So that helped me get some additional budget this year.
Lovely. I wish we could have this conversation, but we need to finish timelines. Probably I'll try to close this conversation with one common thing to all of you. Maybe begin with Anil, then Prasenjit, and then finally Mitali. We've all understood, we've accepted, acknowledged that hybrid IT is something that we all are doing. Right? Is there one best practice that you are currently following, or you envisage that organizations of the future should make it an integral part of their organization? What best practice you'd like to share with everyone who's listening to this? Anil, I'll start with you and request Prasenjit and Mitali to follow.
So taking my experience of our internal modernization and cloud adoption, the migration, the best practice that I would tell to any fellow CIO is to, just like our configuration management database, have an internal development portal where we map what business function, which application, who made it, how it is used, and how it is connected. Because whenever you come to modernization or migration, it is hundreds of times we have to visit it, and it's a pain, especially for the legacy applications. So my suggestion is have an internal development portal only for you, which collates all this information so that if push comes to shove, then you have it.
At least you have something to go back to. Perfect. Now, thank you so much. Prasenjit, your words on this.
Yeah. So we all know that the modern IT workspace, data center, or hybrid IT, whatever we say, it provides company flexibility, agility, and growth. Okay. Now, with my previous experience, what I can say about the best practice. Okay. First, we need to understand what kind of workload we have. Okay. We have to segregate that workload, because to create agility and flexibility in a hybrid environment, we need to understand which workload, the essential ones, to be moved into cloud, and which doesn't require much of a tight integration. Okay, that which requires a frequent or rapid change to keep the company competitive, and which can be easily swapped as a better solution available. Okay, also ensuring that the hybrid IT architectural design is flexible enough to rapidly onboard or offboard or retire a solution at any point of time. So that kind of flexibility in our environment should be. So understanding which application, where to be taken. Okay. Further, to establish ongoing monitoring and bottlenecks. So if there are bottlenecks, so what Mr. Anil Nama said, that we have to have a close monitoring of whatever is going on. Okay, so because there will be multiple vendors, okay, there will be diversified vendors, there will be cloud, non-cloud, on-prem, so that monitoring and where are the bottlenecks. So understanding what application, what is the importance of the application, which requires to be going into cloud, where we can actually scale up, scale down based on the period of the year. Okay, so all this. So ideally, what I think is understanding your applications and accordingly taking a decision.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Prasenjit. Anil. Mitali, before I conclude, love the candidness of all your comments. I wanted to say that, and now over to you for you to finally wrap up the conversation.
So based on our cloud journey, what I can say is spend more time in planning and architecting it rather than jumping to the execution. Because your vendors, your OEM, they'll come, okay, we have done it in 10 other places, and it's very easy. But your challenges are very different from everybody else, right? So to acknowledge that and spend more time and the second thing very important is get the right team in place. So it's just not, AWS team coming in and another coming in and then they do it and done. It's very important to have the right architects in place, talk to your peers, have a strong internal team, who will be involved in the architecting. So I think those are the things probably which has helped, and it is helping us in our migration journey.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. I mean, like I said, it's very tough to know when to close this. I think this is the time when I'll have to, purely because of the paucity of time. Can't thank you all. Like I said, all these years of being an analyst, primarily for folks like you, I learned a lot. I hope all those who are listening to this gain something and think back to the organization. Mitali, Anil, Prasenjit, genuinely, thank you so much. Learned a lot. Bye.
You're welcome. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My pleasure to be among all of you here. Thanks.
Thank you.